All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to tackle a super important topic. How in the world do we manage the risks that come with AI? And we're going to be using a really cool blueprint to do it, one from the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology.
You know, it can sometimes feel like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? But the thing is, AI isn't some far-off future concept anymore. It's already here. I mean, think about it. From the shows Netflix recommends to you to how our cities manage traffic, AI is this huge, powerful force, and it's already shaping our world every single day. And the potential? It's just massive. We're talking about game-changing advancements in pretty much every important area you can think of. Imagine AI helping doctors spot diseases way earlier, or making our cars and planes safer, or even making our energy grids way more efficient. The list of applications is just exploding, growing faster than we can keep up.
But with all this incredible power, it raises a really, really important question. As these AI systems get smarter and more woven into the fabric of our society, who's making sure they're safe? Who ensures they're fair and that we can actually trust them? That's the big challenge we're digging into.
And that brings us to our first big idea here. We have to understand that AI is really a double-edged sword. For all of its amazing benefits, its power also brings some pretty unique and complicated risks along with it.
And check out this quote from the NIST framework itself. This is so key. It says AI systems are socio-technical. What does that even mean? Well, it means AI risk isn't just about buggy code or bad algorithms. It's way deeper. It's about how these systems bump up against real people, real society, and all of our own human behaviors and biases.
So you might be thinking, hang on, haven't we been managing software risk for decades? What's the big deal? And yeah, you're right, we have. But AI is a whole different ballgame.
And this really lays out why. See, with traditional software, you write the rules. With AI, it learns the rules from data. And that data, it can be old, it can be biased. These systems also depend on these gigantic, complex data sets, and sometimes use pre-trained models that we didn't even build, which adds a whole layer of uncertainty. A lot of the time, they're basically a black box, so complex we can't always predict when they'll fail or even explain why they made a certain decision.
And let's be clear, the stakes here are incredibly high. We're not just talking about your app crashing. We're talking about real-world harm. Harms that can affect individual people, threatening their civil rights or their ability to get a job. Harms that can tank a company's reputation or cost them millions. And even harms that could ripple out and disrupt entire ecosystems, like our financial markets or even the environment.
Okay, so if we're trying to avoid all that bad stuff, what's the goal? What are we actually shooting for? What does it even mean for an AI to be trustworthy?
Well, according to NIST, trustworthiness isn't just one thing. It's actually a mix of a few key characteristics. You can almost picture them as the building blocks you need to create responsible AI. So let's break down a couple of the really big ones.
First up, and this is the absolute foundation, the system has to be valid and reliable. I mean, this is table stakes. Think about it. If the AI in a self-driving car can't reliably spot a stop sign, who cares if it's fair or transparent? It just has to work. It has to do what it's supposed to do. Accurately and consistently, period. All right, next up is fairness. And this is a big one. It means we have to actively fight against harmful bias. So, for example, say you have an AI for hiring that's trained on old company data. If that data shows mostly men were hired for engineering jobs in the past, the AI might just learn to discriminate against women. A trustworthy system has to be smart enough to catch that and correct for it, to promote fairness instead of just repeating the biases of the past. And then there's accountability and transparency. This is so important. If an AI system denies you a loan, you should be able to ask why and get a real answer. We need to be able to look under the hood, to peek inside that black box we talked about and understand how it's making decisions. And just as important, we need to know who's ultimately responsible when things go wrong.
Now, here's where it gets tricky. Building trustworthy AI is almost always a balancing act. Sometimes these characteristics are in tension with each other. For example, if you make a system super transparent so you can see every detail of how it works, that might accidentally compromise user privacy. These are really tough trade-offs, and companies have to think through them really carefully. It's exactly because of this complexity that you can't just wing it. You need a plan. You need a blueprint. So let's dive into the one that's designed to help everyone navigate these choppy waters.
And that's where this thing comes in. The NIST AI Risk Management Framework, or the AIRMF for short. Think of it as a guide, a resource that any organization, whether they're building AI, buying it, or just using it, can use to do it all in a much more responsible and trustworthy way.
And what's really great about this framework is how flexible it is. First off, it's voluntary. It's not some heavy-handed government regulation. It's built to work for any industry, for any kind of AI. And it's a living document, meaning it's going to grow and change as the tech itself changes. The whole point is to give people the tools to manage risk while making sure we protect people's rights.
Okay, so how does this actually work? What do you do? Well, the framework is basically built around 4 main functions. The best way to think about it is like a 4-part playbook for getting a handle on risk.
So, those 4 functions are govern, map, measure, and manage. Together, they create this continuous loop of understanding and dealing with AI risks. And that govern part? That's the foundation. It's what holds the whole thing up.
Let's try a simple analogy to make this stick. Imagine you're coaching a sports team. First, you govern. This is like setting up your team's culture, the rules of the game, and your overall strategy. It's your game plan for responsible AI. Then, you map. You're scouting the field, understanding the context where your AI will play, and identifying all the potential hazards. Next, you measure. This is like watching the game tape. You're tracking your AI's performance, looking at the stats, and analyzing the risks with real data. And finally, you manage. You figure out which risks are the most dangerous, and you make a play to deal with them, making sure you get a good, responsible outcome.
I know, this can all sound a little abstract and technical. But what this framework actually means for all of us, well, it's a really big deal. So let's talk about why this should matter to you. Look, this is so much more than some corporate checklist to keep the lawyers happy. It's a real process for making sure that the AI we're building actually lines up with our human values. The end game here is to steer this incredibly powerful technology in a direction that actually helps people, protects our communities, and is good for the planet.
And when organizations actually use this framework, they get some real benefits. They get better at managing risk, they become way more aware of those tricky trade-offs we mentioned earlier, and they get way better at actually testing their systems to make sure they work right. And all of that leads to one simple thing: AI that is safer, fairer, and more trustworthy for every single one of us.
So, in the end, NIST has handed us a pretty powerful roadmap for the journey ahead. But it still leaves us with one big, final question to chew on. A framework like this can give us the how-to, but it's really up to all of us, developers, policymakers, citizens, to figure out the why. So what does true responsibility for AI really look like in practice, out there in the real world?